Upadhara Janatapahara Sharanagata. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. I shall begin where I stopped in the last session. So somebody raised a very interesting and very important, relevant question. How we practice this great ideal of Karma Yoga in our everyday life. So one important point, remember, is an intellectual understanding is not enough for us to be able to practice Karma Yoga. It is one of our fallacies that we sometimes think wrongly, that intellectual knowledge is key to practice. Rather, if we know what we ought to do, then we should be able to do it. But our mind doesn't function that way. That's why frequently we find this conflict between what we intensely want to do, what we intensely desire to do, and what we eventually end up doing, but our mind permits us to do. So there is always a conflict between our sincere, earnest desire to do something and what we eventually do. That's because our mind is not willing to cooperate. And that again is because some of the samskaras, tendencies, emotions, this baggage of vrittis, vasanas and samskaras, which have accumulated in the mental system, create a mental block, an invisible barrier, and we find suddenly we are stuck. So I shall try to explain this. It's not as simple or as superficial as you find in the cases of people suffering from alcoholism, drug addiction, or other obsessive problems. They often, in modern psychology, we make one sweeping statement: it's all habit formations. It is not habits alone. Yoga and Vedanta, and also Buddhist psychology, they all agree on one point. Whatever we do consciously, with a sense of our identification that we are the one who is doing that work, and we are the one who are going to enjoy the results of that action, technically called in Vedanta Kartrutva and Bhoktrutva. Roughly speaking, doership and enjoyership. When we do something consciously like this, what happens is, it creates an invisible residual effect. Something is created in the mental system. It is not just habit alone. It's a strong tendency which by yoga psychologists call samskara. Samskara is much stronger than habits or tendencies. It is a solidified form of all our emotions and feelings and impressions of the same identical type, which becomes a strong obsessive tendency. We cannot get out of it. If it is not so strong, then a person of strong determination can bring about a change in his life if he wants. But strong determination is not often enough. Or you should have the strong determination of a Buddha. He could do that, but even he had to struggle. So if you read Buddha's life, you find he had to struggle with almost 543 life cycles. Jataka tales, his previous life cycles. And all the samskaras and impressions surfaced, came to the surface and created conflicts in his mental system. And he had to go on ascending. Finally, he reached his present life. So that's what you find in Buddha's life. Similarly, when we try to practice great spiritual values like non-attachment, doing everything as a karma yoga, also dharma, with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, with all attention. Even if you are convinced that this is necessary, this is important, this is relevant, still that won't be enough for us to make use of that spiritual technique in our everyday activity. Because mind frequently doesn't help, mind doesn't frequently cooperate, mind is not acting as a friend. So the only way to get out of this problem is to get the mind ready for it, to turn our mind into a good friend, to force our mind to cooperate with what we are trying to do. For that, you should generate more healthy spiritual food for the mind. Right now, the mind is willing to cooperate with our good decision to do, let us say, try to practice meditation. You find this happening in the lives of many great spiritual seekers. And you find this mentioned in a different language, using a different vocabulary in the writings of the great Christian mystics. Often they put it, of course they interpret it differently, because Vedanta doesn't accept the doctrine of evil. Vedanta interprets problems on the basis of the doctrine of error, not doctrine of evil. So Vedanta and Yoga and Buddhism, of course, all these Oriental philosophical systems, they are unanimous in their view that it is because of our own mental impressions, which have negative mental impressions, negative tendencies, which are accumulated in the mental system, that throw up this obstacle, which are technically called antarayas, obstacles in spiritual life. And so obstacles are nothing but alien, or let us say it's just like the bacteria and germs that create disease in our body. So what do? We take medicine to get rid of these bacteria or these germs which create problems for health. For that we take medicine, we also do exercise, and we eat good food. So we should give medicine to our mind, not modern medicine, not capsules, but spiritual medicine. And spiritual medicine, or maybe the most simple and the most easily digestible spiritual medicine is karma yoga. This can be done by anybody. This can be practiced. People, let us say, who try to meditate, who try to pray, who try to practice karma yoga, if they find their mind is becoming obsessed, greedy, they cannot practice non-attachment, what they should do, they should just continue doing good actions, whether with a selfish motive or without a selfish motive. So do good things with a selfish motive. Well, I'm proud, I'm doing good things. So your ego will get a promotion, a spiritual promotion. Ego is there, no doubt, and ego is certainly not very good, that we know. But Sri Ramakrishna puts in very, very impressive language. One of the greatest statements for practical spirituality you find in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is, Let this ego be your servant and not a robber. The ego should not be allowed to rob things away from your home. The ego, if you have a strong ego, very proud, you have a lot of physical energy. All right, do good work. Maybe you can do some good job for others. If there is a temple or any holy place, a church or whatever, maybe you go and do some service there. You may be proud, well, I'm doing good work. That's good actually. That is the beginning of Karma Yoga. So that's why Lord Krishna did not teach Karma Yoga to Arjuna at the beginning. What he taught was Sakama Karma. Sakama Karma means action with strong desire, action with a strong motive. Good action, good noble action, go on doing things. Because these good noble actions generate spiritual energy. And that helps us to go forward, and that helps us to make further progress in spiritual life. And eventually you will reach a point where you will be easily be able to practice Karma Yoga. One of the greatest problems in modern times for Karma Yoga ideal is our present paradigm of life. The 21st century paradigm, where you want immediate result and our attention span is very short, and we are obsessed with a kind of ultra pragmatism. Everything is reduced down to what extent we can get a benefit, a positive result from what we do. So we cannot do anything without simultaneously thinking of some practical results. So during one of our interactions, when somebody asked me this question, so I said, people who really want to start spiritual life but cannot meditate because mind is restless, cannot read a scripture because mind is restless, cannot go and participate in lecture programs or discussions or prayer meetings because mind is restless, then you do one thing. There is a temple or a good place or church or any place nearby. They need volunteers. Go and do some volunteer work. And they are not going to pay you because it's a volunteer work. And at the beginning you may be proud, well, I am volunteering for a noble cause. Be proud of it. Be proud of doing something good. That's how we evolve from lower ego to higher ego. So we can sublimate our ego. So this is something very important we can do in modern times. So one point to remember is we should get rid of this obsession with practicality, pragmatism, utilitarian obsession. That whatever we should do, whatever we do, we should have a positive and immediate tangible result. We should be able to do something good without worrying about what results these actions are going to make. You should be able to sit quiet somewhere. You should be able to read a book on mysticism. You should be able to read a book on history and philosophy at the beginning of spiritual life, because in modern time these classics or these subjects are not directly linked to an immediate job or money or wealth. So you are reading a book on classical literature, mysticism and philosophy and fully enjoying it just for the sake of reading it. Well, those of you who have any doubt about whether this is possible, if you read Thoreaus Walden, you find Thoreau was a very interesting person. And you find these three great American transcendentalists were the first in Western world who actually practiced many of the Vedantic ideals in their day-to-day life. Of course, in their own way, I would say. So Thoreau, Pittman and Emerson. So Thoreaus Walden, if you read, this man moves from place to place and he travels from mountains and valleys, he watches the trees and ponds and skies and clouds and so on, and he tries to identify himself with this external nature, enjoying their beauty, their charm and their sublime grandeur. Now, in modern times, our present educational system won't permit us to do that. What are you going to get out of it? Somebody who's working in a call center or information technology office 15 hours a day, for him every minute is money. Such persons won't find it a pleasant thing to do, to move from mountains and valleys and rivers and ponds, won't be able to do that. So our present educational system and paradigm of life that is evolving around it will not permit us to do many of these great things. So what is important is one should be able to do things, read things, listen to things without attaching a tangible profit, a benefit to that particular action. That is the beginning of higher life. Say Buddha left his kingdom and went somewhere and sat under a tree. And Christ also left his place for 18 years. He was invisible. He must have been practicing great austerities. Shankaracharya left his home when he was less than 7 years. Not only that, some of the great inventors, if you just, I don't want to mention names because they are still alive and very prominent, well known. Many great inventors, many great innovators, many great men and women who started new ventures in business and industry, they had a period of time when they spent their time in some kind of activity close to nature. In fact, when you leave your office and spend time on, I'll say, in close proximity with nature, contemplating and thinking, some of the hidden potential powers and skills and gifts are self-revealed from the inner chambers of our mind. That is the mother of all innovation. All great innovators had a time period when they moved away from their busy schedule and spent some time for higher thinking. And again, of course, they bounced back, came back to business. Of course, they did not become yogis, they did not become spiritual seekers necessarily. But still, out of this thought and contemplation on something higher without attaching a practical benefit to it, from that they got new ideas, new skills. It could be maybe moving about in the ashramas, the monasteries of Himalayan regions. Many of them did that. I'm not going into those details. So what I mean to say, it all shows that if you spend time and energy for doing things which are obviously not linked to a tangible result, a profit or a gain, from that activity something higher, something sublime is born. What does it show? It shows we can go back into our own resources and we can unearth from our own resources higher things. In fact, in one of the Upanishad dialogues, it's a very famous dialogue, it's called Jyoti Brahmanam, it is called. These Vedantic dialogues, if you read just as mere stories, you miss the whole message. We are talking about certain episodes and events that must have taken place 5,000 years back, 3000 BC, at a time and in an age where people lived close to nature, where people contemplated and spend their time in contemplation, profound contemplation on the mystery of nature. So I'm going to narrate an interesting debate, let us say a dialogue between a philosopher king, what you call Rajarshi, philosopher king, his name was Janaka, and a great philosopher sage, who was a sage, well-known sage or philosopher of his time, Yajnavalkya. The story is this. In those days in ancient India, great philosophers and sages used to move from country to country, from kingdom to kingdom. That's how these great Vedic literature, the Upanishads, the teachings of Bhagavad Gita were born during these dialogues that took place when great philosophers and sages visited emperors in their palaces. So Yajnavalkya was the most well-known, celebrated sage and philosopher of those days. So he is visiting his friend, and his friend is a great emperor, Janaka. Historically speaking, it happened somewhere in Mithila, in what is now the state of Bihar in North India. At that time it was a big empire. So when Yajnavalkya, a great philosopher, came to Janaka's court, the king's court, there was a debate. The king asked the question. So there are 5 questions. The first 4 questions are very simple, nothing very profound, apparently. He says, Kim Jyotirayam Purushayiti, that's how the question begins. During normal time, during daytime, how do we move about, how do we do things, how do we travel? He says sunlight. What is that light? What is that light which enables you to move about, do your work during daytime? So the obvious answer was Surya, the sun. Suppose there is no sunlight available at night. What light helps you? Moonlight, that's the answer. Yajnavalkya gave the answer. Suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, then what will you do? You may strike a matchbox. You may strike a lamp. So fire or Agni or blazing fire you may start for light and heat. Suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, no lamp or flame available. How do you communicate? So light means something that reveals things. That's the meaning of light. So light should be the word light should be taken in its symbolic meaning, a metaphor. Light means something in whose presence things are revealed. Light is something that reveals things. Light reveals itself, and other things get revealed when light is present. So light has got 2 functions. It reveals other things and also it reveals itself. So then the 4th question is also very simple. Just a continuation. The 5th question is the beginning of spiritual philosophy. Long discussion is there. The 4th question is, suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, then how do you communicate? There is the speech, you hear things. Suppose you are sitting in a room, there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, and then you can hear a noise coming from the street and you come to know there's a car moving the street. 5th question is, that is very simple. Suppose, very simple, but it's the beginning of an elaborate discussion of philosophy, which are being translated, written about by a large number of Indian scholars and also Western scholars right from 18th century. If you find long discussions in David Hume, in Hendrik, who translated these from Sanskrit into Latin at the beginning of 19th century. Then Paul Deussen, who translated these as part of his translation of 60 Upanishads. So These texts have become so profound, so celebrated among the philosophers and thinkers of Europe right from the late 18th century onwards. The fifth question is, suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, and no speech, then what's the light that reveals everything? Then Yajnavalkya says, there is one light that is present in all of us. That is the light of all lights. It's called Jyotisham Jyoti, means the light of all lights. Actually, that is the only original light available in the world. The sunlight is of no use if the inner light, the inner lamp is not burning in your heart. That is the light of Atman, Atma Jyoti. The moonlight, the light of fire, the light of a candle, or the power of speech, all these are totally useless unless there is that Atma Jyoti, the light of all lights, is present in all of us. A dead man, that the Atma Jyoti, the light of the self, the light of Atman, withdraws itself from a person. That person cannot see if there is sunlight. He cannot hear anything even if sounds are coming from all over the place. So that is a real light. That is real life. That is the source of all lights. Now, we should connect with that light present in all of us. Where do we begin? We begin at the grossest level. If you want to start your journey to the top of the hill, you have to begin the journey at the bottom of the hill. And suppose there is a door that opens to the trail, the road, the path that will take you to the top of the hill. You open the door and enter the trail and start walking. If you walk enough, if you have the tenacity, if you have got the Shraddha, if you have the sense of sanctity and sacredness, and if you have the power of determination and the purity of purpose and willingness to sacrifice, then what happens? You continue following the trail. The trail is right now right in front of you. You have just to open the door. You open the door and you enter the road, the trail. Karma Yoga is the trail. And Karma Yoga is the path that is open right in front of all of us. Every day we do everything, including my giving this class, including your karma, you listening to this, or your household duties and responsibilities, whatever that may be. Teaching, studying, working, in a hospital, whatever may be. That is a trail that is opened in front of you. Once you enter the road, you are destined to reach the top of the hill. Because the road, if you follow, is destined to take you to the top of the hill. Because it doesn't lead anywhere else. So at the beginning, we must give up our lethargy. We must be fired and inspired by a noble ideal, a higher ideal, and then enter the road. And that is Karma Yoga. Swami Vivekananda, in one of his lectures, it actually comes in his Raj Yoga lectures. He gives a very interesting, this is taken from some ancient scriptures, but Swamiji, in his own unique, matchless skill, style, he expounds it. This is how prana can be controlled. But that applies to Karma Yoga also. So I shall try to put it in that language. So Swamiji gives, he takes this interesting mythological story from one of the Puranas, Yoga Vasishtha or somewhere, where it is stated there was a king and he had a minister. the minister somehow fell from the grace of the king and they didn't agree on certain things. So he was expelled from the kingdom and he was imprisoned on the top of a hill. He was imprisoned on the top floor of a tower. So that's a story. A king had a minister, they were very good friends, but there was a disagreement. So they quarreled and the minister was expelled by the king and the minister was imprisoned on the top floor of a tower. He was living as a prisoner. His wife was a very devoted person who knew that minister was innocent. So she was a very wise person also. So one day his wife, crying and weeping, came to the bottom of the tower and the minister wrote on a piece of from hard, maybe charcoal or something, he scrawled somewhere, "You please bring a thin thread, then a rope, then a strong big rope, and also a beetle, some kind of insect, a beetle." And this was the instruction. Of course, there are in the Puranas there is another version of the story. The minister sent this message through a servant to his wife. Anyway, the servant brought all this as ordered by the wife to the bottom of the tower. So a beetle, that is some kind of insect, and a tiny thread, a thin thread, then a bigger thread, then a big rope, and a beetle, and some honey. So the king instructed the servant who has brought all this from his wife, "You put a little honey on the horns of the beetle and then tie the thin thread to its legs and tie the longer thread to its thin thread, then the rope," like that. So the beetle, smelling the honey that was sprayed in front of its horns, it started slowly moving upward and reached the top of the tower. When it reached the top of the tower, slowly the minister took the beetle, the thin thread, then the strong thread, then the rope, and finally through that he escaped. That's the story goes. The point is, even if a person is restless, he is imprisoned in his own mental agonies and worries and anxieties. Even if you cannot pray, if your mind is restless, even if you cannot practice any strong vows or austerities, meditation and things like that, still, if you just start practicing noble, good activities which are not particularly beneficial to you but good for others, good for a broader cause, that is the beginning of our spiritual journey. That's the beginning of a spiritual pilgrimage. Because the beetle is following the smell of honey. It is bound to reach the top of the tower. Similarly, when you start a journey following this trail of Karma Yoga, we are destined to reach the highest level of spiritual perfection. That takes us to the highest spiritual achievement. This Karma Yoga becomes the natural characteristic of a highly enlightened person, and it is something that should be considered to be the goal for the beginner in spiritual life. That's why Shankaracharya in his commentary says, Karmanishtayaha chitta suddhidvarena purushartha heduttam na swatantrena jnananishthadu swatantrena purushartha heduhu anyan apeksha. So, if a person starts practicing karma yoga nishtha, what happens, Slowly, his mind takes a promotion. He starts evolving. You can find this in your own life. People who have been continually doing something good for others, they are accumulating a lot of wealth. Not wealth that you deposit in a bank, but it's also a spiritual bank where you deposit your spiritual wealth. And the result of that spiritual wealth is that we feel, well, we have done something good. That particular feeling of experience is called Kridakrityada and Kridarthada. Kridakrityada and Kridarthada it's called. Kridarthada means the feeling, well, I have attained something. Then you feel a kind of inner self-fulfillment. Kridakrityada means I have done something that I ought to have done. Actually, the feeling that comes when you get this unique, blissful experience, this feeling, well, I have done something that I should have done. I have attained something that I should have attained. That actually is a feeling of self-fulfillment, chitta prasada. This happens sometimes if you are a writer, if you finish a book, maybe that day you feel a great sense of achievement. But that is only temporary. Anything at the empirical level will produce a little bit of this chitta prasada or contentment. But we should remember, unless it has a spiritual color, it won't be permanent. That's the important thing. Now, in Vedantic tradition, this way of life used to be called Agnya. So, in its internal psychological aspect, it can be called Swadharma. You're doing your duty with all concentration, with a sense of sanctity. Then what happens? You get this chitta prasada. Anything that you do with full concentration, the whole mind is focused on that, and you consider that work as something sacred, something sublime. So the feeling that it is something sacred, something sublime, well, that produces a unique mental tranquility and peace. When you take a flower with the great Shraddha, you place the altar, or you read your sacred scripture thinking that this is something noble, that produces an inner tranquility. You can read the Bhagavad Gita and Bible both as literary classics and also as holy scriptures. When you read them as holy scriptures, you are deriving from it something that a casual reader cannot possibly derive. The casual reader may get an idea, some intellectual information, but he is not spiritually enriched. He may be able to write an article on the Gita, on the Bible, Sermon on the Mount. He may be able to give a lecture, and he may be able to impress people, but unless he has that sense of sanctity and sacredness towards the Holy Scripture, then only he will get the spiritual benefit. That is true of great scientists also. So great scientists, they may be total agnostics or atheists, but the dedication, the one-pointed dedication, determination with which they work, they do their job in the laboratory, that actually forces nature to reveal its secrets. It is called tapasya. So tapa means you're getting heated through concentration. You are actually deriving one bit of knowledge from within yourself. All knowledge is within. Through your external practices, you are forcing it out. That's called a discovery in science. That's called self-discovery in spiritual science. So this is an important thing. Another very important aspect of Karma Yoga is it helps you to start your evolution at a different level. Now we have no scope for further evolution in physical level. At a physical level, our evolution is complete. There is no more scope for it. But at the cultural level, at the spiritual level, there is still a lot of scope for evolution. That's why there is so much of diversity in human temperaments. These 8 billion people in the world have 8 billion different attitudes towards life and temperaments. Because 8 billion different levels of evolution. Cultural evolution, not physical evolution. If physical evolution goes, it's the same. So, Karma Yoga enables us to speed up our spiritual evolution or cultural evolution. Cultural evolution means higher and higher perspectives, the ability to acquire higher wisdom. As I mentioned earlier this morning, science and technology can give us comforts and the tools and the means for increasing more and more comforts to make life more and more comfortable or enjoyable. But science and technology cannot give us the wisdom to be able to handle the gifts that science and technology give us, the nature gives us, knowledge and power, and the ability to control external things. The ability to manage, to use these powers for the good of humanity and resist the temptation to use them for the destructive purposes. That wisdom doesn't come from science and technology. And actually that wisdom doesn't come from modern utilitarian trends in university education. Because modern education becomes so technology oriented, somewhat technology obsessed. At that extent, it becomes obsessed with short-term results, quick results, and immediate profits, immediate gains. That's the main problem. So that's why we frequently find our emotional intelligence goes down as we neglect humanities more and more in our educational system. When we don't study classics, we don't study philosophy. Another area of our education, our own personality is neglected. Emotional intelligence, emotional stability can get a lot of benefit from studying classics, studying literature, history, and so on. So that is an important thing to remember. Now in Vedanta and also in yoga, there is a particular concept called Agnya. Agnya is the word used. If you look at the dictionary, the word Agnya is frequently translated as sacrifice. But its real meaning, according to the traditional commentaries, according to authors who have written commentaries on the text, Sanskrit text where Agnya is expounded, the meaning is a noble act for the good of others. Yajna vai sreshtatamam karma. It means Yajna is nothing but a noble, a sublime deed for the good of others. Now, in the Gita, there is a famous statement, Yajnarthar karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaka tadartham karma kundeya mukta sangha samachara. It comes in the 3rd chapter. Everyone should do his duty, his responsibility, lead his whole life as yajna. Those who do their duties and obligations in any other sense, without looking upon it as a yajna, as an act of holy sacrifice for the good of humanity, then what happens, that kind of activity becomes a cause for worldly bondage. Bondage means what? When we do something, that action produces a lot of anxieties. When we worry too much about the result, it creates a lot of anxieties, it creates a lot of worries, a lot of conflicts, concern, and so many other problems. Because when the results are not up to expectation, we may face terrible disappointment. So this fear of failure always creates anxiety and concern. So you cannot undertake any work without, to some extent, getting too anxious about the results. That's a problem of every kind of action, unless it is done as yajna. If it is not done as yajna, it becomes a bondage. It binds you. What is bondage here? Bondage means something that binds your mind. And what is the chain with which you are bound? This concern, this worry, anxiety, I have done, whether it will work or not, whether it will succeed or not, whether success or failure. Too much of worry, too much of anxiety, too much of tension. And it leads to sleepless nights, concern, worry, especially those who are frequently suffering from the problems of job insecurity, health problems. They suffer a lot of depression and a lot of anxieties and worries. Now, I don't mean to say that it is wrong to worry or it is wrong to have concern, not at all. What I mean to say, it will be wise to understand that there is a way of doing it without causing worries and without causing concerns. And that method of doing our work without worrying too much, if there is a way to do our work, to live our life without any scope, without any problem of worry, then that is a more intelligent way of living our life. And Gita tells there is a way to live without worry. And that method is called yajna. So that is the same as Swadharma. The principle of Swadharma as such is limited in its scope, limited in the context of our everyday activity. But the principle of yajna is further extended. It becomes a total philosophy of life. It also includes living in close proximity and harmony with nature, living in close proximity and harmony with the whole creation, and following the path of dharma. So these three terms, one is dharma, which means righteousness, and this harmony, and then yajna are very important in the context of Gita. Gita takes this concept from an earlier text. So, the oldest philosophical spiritual classic of Hindu Vedanta tradition is Rig Veda. So Rig Veda speaks of three important concepts which actually constitute the whole philosophy of living our life as a yajna. These three concepts are Satyam, Rutam and Dharma. Satyam obviously means truth, or living a truthful life. And Dharma means righteousness, right conduct, right way of speech, right conduct, right effort, all the eightfold disciplines of Buddha, Ashtanga Marga is called. right memory, right effort, right conduct, and right concentration, right speech, all these, samyak smriti, samyak vyayama, samyak ajiva, samyak samadhi, and so on. This Buddha gave this eightfold discipline for any person who wants to reach nirvana, with the only with the only way to attain the highest happiness according to Buddha, which I am going to quote that particular portion from Dhammapada before finishing today's lecture. So this Satyam, truthfulness, Dharma means righteousness, and Rutha means in perfect harmony with the whole creation. There is a invisible interrelatedness that harmonizes the whole creation. If you violate that invisible rhythm, if you violate that interconnectedness, interrelatedness, it creates problem for even our body. Actually, when we take bad food or drink dirty water, we are violating the rhythm of our physical body. So the English word rhythm and the Sanskrit word is rhythm in Rigveda Samhita, which means the highest principle of interrelatedness, harmony according to scriptural teachings. That's the meaning of rhythm in Rigveda Samhita. So when you live our life, according to this universal principle of interrelatedness and universal harmony, without violating that, then we are living our life, we are conducting our life as yajna for the good of whole humanity. That's why Buddha makes this profound statement. So he says, this is from Dhammapada. It is a Pali text, is Arogya Paramalabha Sandutti Paramam Dhanam Visasa Paramanyadi Nibbanam Paramam Sukham. So that's Buddha's statement from the Dhammapada. Health is the greatest acquisition because body is needed. Without physical health and mental health, we won't be able to undertake any of these spiritual exercises, which may take us to nirvana, the highest accomplishment. Contentment is the greatest wealth, sandutti. So sandushti in Sanskrit becomes sandutti in Pali. Paramam dhanam. The highest wealth is contentment. That contentment is what is meant by happiness. And that is the real implication of the word happiness in the Vedantic context or in the context of Gita. Visasa paramajnati. Confidence is the best of relatives. Jnati means those relations, relatives. Nibbanam paramam sukham. And nirvana is the highest state of happiness. Of course, this is in this concept of highest happiness is a state of spiritual blissfulness which one reaches when you attain nirvana. But in the ordinary context of our everyday life, we can say, once we keep our mind fed with these ideas, we are giving good food to our mind. If you give bad food to a person, if that person falls sick, he becomes angry with you, he becomes your enemy. If you give bad food to your body falls sick and it quarrels with you, so you go to hospital. If you give bad food to your mind also becomes angry with you. Your mind becomes your worst enemy. If you give good food, your mind also becomes your friend. So what's a good food that you can give to the mind? These great ideas. So, one way to face the problems that we have to encounter in our spiritual path is to keep feeding our mind with good, healthy, nutritious food. Good, healthy and nutritious food. Just as body becomes healthy and strong when you give good food to your body, so mind also becomes friendly with you. It becomes healthy and strong and friendly when you give it good food. So, first we must develop the habit of generating spiritual energy through karma yoga. And what is the best food that you can give to your mind? The spiritual energy. Then what happens? All the mental blocks, all the obstacles, all the conflicts between what we want to do and what our mind permits us to do. All these conflicts are gone. All these hidden, invisible mental blocks disappear when our mind becomes a friend. And the only way to turn our mind to a best friend is to give it good food. And the best food I can give is spiritual energy. The spiritual energy can be generated by karma yoga. That is the most commonplace, the easiest path. You can read scriptures, you can meditate, you can pray. These are different ways of generating spiritual energy. But the one path that anyone can follow, any person can follow every day in his or her life, is by giving a new perspective, to a new outlook to what we are doing and how we are doing. When we turn karma into karma yoga, that becomes a royal path to the highest spiritual contentment. And that's the real happiness that Buddha is talking about. So we will have this discussion tomorrow morning again at 10:30. Now we will have interaction. We have got almost half an hour. You are most welcome to ask questions.
You can type your questions on YouTube, or you can raise your hand. There's a button on Zoom, and we'll unmute and let you ask the question. Go ahead, Partha, if you have a question.
Hi, Swami, namaskar. I have a very simple question, not spiritual at all. You quoted something from Dhammapada.
Yeah.
And it sounded Sanskrit.
It is similar to Sanskrit, not Sanskrit. See, it is similar to Sanskrit.
I always heard that Buddha wrote in Pali, or spoke in Pali or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to clear that up. I know the answer, I think, but...
Yeah, okay. So, the point is, in Pali, for example, nirvana becomes nibbana. Frequently, many of the vowel sounds and consonants are interchangeable when they are put in Pali. Pali, we can say, it is a less refined form of Sanskrit. So, Sanskrit is more refined, its grammatical structure is more well defined, more structured. It remains the same. But Pali was the script in which they used to write, the Buddhist scholars used to write. And Buddha mostly spoke in Prakrit. Prakrit is again a vernacular. There are different forms of Prakrit. Eastern Prakrit, Purva Prakrit, Dakshina Prakrit, Uttara Prakrit, Paschima Prakrit. Again, these are corrupted forms of Sanskrit. Maybe it may be more accurate to say unrefined or primitive forms of Sanskrit. is language of the masses. So when Buddha, after Buddha's passing away, about 50, 60 years later, in the first Buddhist council that was held in Rajagriha, very close to today's Patna in Bihar state, it is the capital of Magadha Empire. A number of Buddhist scholars and nuns, they assembled the first Buddhist council, and they recited the teachings of Buddha, because Buddha used to preach traveling all over northern India, all the way from Darbhanga district right up to Gandhara, Afghanistan. So it is a huge interland, north of Vindhyas and south of Himalayas, and right from all of the entire western portion right up to Darbhanga state he went. So he preached in Prakrit language, which is the language of the masses. So and these Buddhist monks, they recollected from their memory many of Buddha's teachings, and they recorded all this in Pali. So altogether there were three important streams of Buddha's teaching. It's called Tripitakas, three baskets. Tripitaka means baskets with three collections, three streams, so to speak. Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, Abhidhamma Pitaka. So Sutta Pitaka contains Dhammapada. Dhammapada is the most well known. It is very small. It is not a very big book, very small, but it is one of the most widely translated portions of Buddha's teachings. It is from Sutta Pitaka. It contains some of the most sublime thought currents of early Buddhism. Okay.
Suprit, go ahead.
Swamiji, namaskaram. I'm Suprit. I'm 29-year-old bachelor and I work for a startup here in the Silicon Valley. It's very interesting to hear the Karma Yoga, and one of the things that I have always heard from my parents or through all the lectures that I've listened is never get attached to the results, and but do your work with all sincerity. But I have a question. So if we don't do some work with passion and with a desire to get very good results, especially I work in a startup and both passion is needed and there is a fierce competitive spirit in the work environment, within the work environment, as well as to compete against other startups, other competitions. So the very basis of the driving force is, one is passion, basically desire. Second is competition. Both are not close to Karma Yoga. So how do I want to follow Karma Yoga. I want to be a student of Vedanta. How do I deal with this?
So I shall explain this, but before that I shall quote one verse which really is the answer, and then I shall explain that verse. Saktaha karmani avidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata kuryat vidvan tatha asaktaha chigishu loka sangraham. So this particular verse tells us very interesting. It's a real answer to your question. There are two types of people. One type of people, very passionate, very enthusiastic, driven by a strong desire to succeed. And actually he succeeds very well. He is highly accomplished, and he becomes very proud of his success, highly passionate, wonderful. Another person, maybe his brother, he has the same enthusiasm, not less enthusiastic, same drive, same push, the same what do you call killer instinct. That's the language you may like to use to succeed, so to speak. Killer instinct, Okay, now his brother. Now the point is, both share the same qualities so far as their ability, their efficiency, their enthusiasm, their drive and push and passion is concerned. but only one difference. His brother is a wise person. And where is the difference? And he is not a wise person. His brother has got a spiritual wisdom along with all these qualities. What is the spiritual wisdom? He understands that all this success, all these are necessary and useful. But they won't last long. At least they won't be everlasting. So that understanding makes him a wise person, and that understanding saves him from a probable failure. No one can guarantee that he will succeed in every single undertaking in his life. Nobody has succeeded. Nobody 100% success rate in every undertaking. It is a human impossibility. Impossible. You may not succeed as much as you wanted to succeed. That is a partial failure. So it is impossible for one to be always successful 100%. Now the point is, if you are not equipped with this wisdom, what happens, your partial minute failure can create a lot of problems for you, disappointment and so on. But his brother, he is still smiling though he has not fully succeeded. Why? Because he knows it is impossible for everyone to be always successful in every undertaking. This is not a philosophy, it is a common sense which everyone understands. But very often, when we work with passion, when we work with this drive and push, we frequently forget that. And that can land us in trouble. To avoid that problem, Kurya Vidwan Tatha Asaktaka. So Gita says, the person, the wise man, Vidwan, the wise person, who is equally efficient, who is equally successful, equally driven by passion and desire, he is asakta. He is not obsessed with the results. He also works for the results, but he is not obsessed. So that's the only difference. So remember, it is always better to work with passion and drive and push the fire to succeed. It's always better than doing nothing. But at some point, as you grow, you will realize that it is not possible for everyone to succeed in everything. So one should be ready for it. It doesn't in any way make you indifferent, negligent, or irresponsible, not at all. But you are successful, you are efficient, but also we have this spiritual common sense to realize that 100% success in every undertaking is not possible for anyone. That's the idea. So if you are working with a lot of passion and desire, all very good, that's needed. But as you grow up, you will realize that there is a need for something else along with this success, so that you will be protected against some possible or probable setbacks in life. That's all.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
What is the source of that quotation, Maharaj? The Sanskrit shloka?
Saktaha karmani avidvamso etha kurvandi bharada kurya vidwan tatha asaktaha chikishuhu loka sangraham. So you will find this in the 3rd chapter. I shall, the exact verse number I can give you.
3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita.
You can later get, you go to my class, you can. Yeah,
Okay, Maharaj.
It is 25th verse. Please remember, 25th verse of 3rd chapter. 3rd chapter, 25th verse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are 3 questions from YouTube. One from Hima. What is the way to totally destroy past bad samskaras, how to become pure like Himalayan mountain?
Yeah, Himalaya. Okay, that's okay. Anyway, that's a wonderful question. The point is, we cannot destroy samskaras. Samskaras become dysfunctional. Their ability to create problems for our mind can be neutralized. And this could be done by creating and generating opposite samskaras. So Patanjali uses the term Pratipaksha Bhavana, means, suppose, to give an example, suppose you feel that suppose a person is driven by greed, so to speak, then he should try to develop the strong conviction of the problems of greed and how futile it is to be driven by greed in all our activities. So we know that it is not the best thing to do everything with a strong sense of desire to possess, the good, so fired by the greed for everything. No, well, we know that we are intellectually aware of this. So this awareness can be strengthened by constantly remembering that. Then what happens, the negative samskaras become weakened. So we can compare our mind to a bag. The bag is full of samskaras. Many samskaras are negative samskaras, not so desirable, and many of them are positive samskaras, they are very good samskaras. Now, if you increase the amount of positive samskaras, the influence or the impact of negative samskaras will be proportionately reduced, decreased. So the only way to weaken negative samskaras is to constantly generate positive samskaras through positive actions, positive activities, positive thoughts and positive ideas. Of course, at some point, at a higher level of our meditation or yoga practice, we will be able to we call it burn negative samskaras. So it's something like burning, cooking, let us say cooking grains. If you cook grains, they cannot sprout again. Or if you fry it, it cannot sprout again. Like that, Dagdha Bijavad means the seeds can be, the food grain seeds can be cooked or burned, then they will not sprout and become a plant and a tree. So that they become totally irrelevant. This is possible through higher meditative practices. When you become spiritually enlightened, these negative samskaras become completely as good as gone, vanished. But before that, in our everyday life, we can counteract the effect of the impact of negative samskaras by consciously trying to generate positive samskaras through positive actions and positive thought currents. Every positive action, good action, compassion, goodness, kindness, reading scriptures, reading karma yoga, practicing karma yoga, listening to great ideas, bhajans, meditations, prayers, all these can generate positive samskaras. And then you find negative samskaras become weakened and they cannot do much harm to us. Their ability to do harm can be completely neutralized by generating more and more positive samskaras through positive activities.
Okay, Maharaj. There are a few more questions from YouTube.
Yeah.
This one comes from Gautam. He is joining us from Mysore in India.
Yeah.
So,
Gautam is there, very most welcome. Yeah.
So his question is,
Yeah.
Karma Yoga alone, when applied at work, sometimes becomes monotonous. So karma yoga alone, along with bhakti, gives more energy. Is this also right?
That's true, that is true, that is true. And you find the majority of karma yogins were also practicing bhakti yoga. And surprisingly, you find all the great spiritual teachers who were exponents of Jnana Yoga were actually great bhaktas and also great karma yogins. See, just think of the archetypal philosopher of India, Shankaracharya. When you talk about Indian philosophy or Vedanta, the first name is Shankara, who wrote all the greatest books and philosophical theses. He was also the author of the most profound devotional poems, 65 devotional poems to all the deities. And he is the one who formulated the puja paddhati, the way of worship rituals. And he was the one who was debating with all the great philosophers. And he is the one who wrote all the philosophical classics. And he founded 10 monastic orders. Remember, Ignatius Loyola founded one. Shankara 10, and he installed many temples. He established monasteries in the 4 distant corners of India, and all that he did within 32 years. And Swami Vivekananda, he came to this country in 1893. He was just 30 years old, and he passed away in 1902. Within that short time, how much work he did. Or think of Christ, who also didn't live long. So you find Buddha, of course, he lived for 80 years. So you find many of these great spiritual teachers were practicing all the 4 yogas. We should remember that. Of all of them, Buddha is the solitary example who was an exclusive karma yogi. All others practiced Jnana Yoga, Bhakti, Karma, everything. So normally it is very beneficial. It is also desirable to practice Bhakti. Bhakti, for a Bhakta, it is easy to practice Karma Yoga. Bhakta will find psychologically much more easy to practice Karma Yoga. We can offer all that he does as an offering to the Lord. It's simple, it's easy, natural.
So there are 3 more questions, Maharaj. This comes from Indranil. He has 2 questions. What is the meaning of Nitta Karma and Naimitta Karma?
Yeah.
Naimittika Karma.
Yeah.
And he also asks, how do I understand what is my Swadharma?
Swadharma, yeah. Nitya Karma.
Karma, Naimittika Karma.
Yeah, Naimittika. This is Naimittika. Means related to one nimitta. Okay, Nitya Karmas are normally in Sandhya Vandana or in ancient times, in some places, some now also every day they used to do Agnihotra in the morning, and Sandhya Vandanas, Upasthana. There are certain Nitya Karmas that practice, which every day you should practice. And Nitya Karmas are obligatory and mandatory, though you do not derive any special benefit from it. If you do not practice it, you should do prayaschitta. So that is the speciality of Nitya Karma. Nitya Karmas are to be practiced as mandatory and obligatory rituals every day. And if you do not practice, you have to do prayaschitta. And if you practice, there is no special benefit from Nitya Karma. That is Nitya. Sandhya Vandana you have to do every day, but there is no special benefit from it. Naimittika Karma is related to Nimitta. Nimitta means due to certain occasions. For example, let us say Amavasya, Paurnima, or maybe due to Annaprasha, or there are certain seasonal Naimitya Karmas, certain Naimitya Karmas related to or particular sampradaya and tradition, and certain naimitya karmas which we may be trying to practice for some special benefits. So it is related to some nimitta, some occasional cause. That is naimitya karmas. It is called nitya karma, naimittika karma. What is the other question?
How do I know? How do I understand what is my Swadharma?
Yeah. One thing, one thing to remember is every person will have some understanding of what his or her Swadharma is. See, Dr. Swadharma as a professional is to, it's very obvious. And Grihastha Swadharma as a family man is also very obvious. And a student, he has to study, and teacher has to teach, a doctor has to treat. So there are these Swadharmas are automatically coming to us by virtue of our position, our status, and also our qualifications and social compulsions. For example, if you are if you are an engineer, and if you are a qualified engineer, then the engineering profession becomes your means for supporting your family and your own livelihood. And it is so by virtue of your qualification, you are called adhikaritva, by virtue of your social status, social obligations. These are all swadharmas. Then what happens, if you really practice swadharma, you derive a kind of inner satisfaction. So some commentators make occasional remarks to the effect that a person who is practicing swadharma will have in his own private mental world the conviction that he is following the right path. And the person who is practicing paradharma will have the opposite feeling. He will feel a kind of inner conflict. So a person who is practicing swadharma will have a natural tranquility and peace and contentment. A person who is practicing paradharma, not his duty, but is intruding into another sphere of activity, he will have a lot of conflicts. So chitta prasada is one important criterion for judging whether it is a swadharma or paradharma. If you see swadharma, you feel you are deriving a great joy from doing that. If you don't do that, you feel a kind of incompleteness.
So there is a question here. Looks like a good question here from Marshall from YouTube. When we face adharma, should we continue our lives and keep doing what we do with a sense of sanctity, or should we intervene and try to change our surroundings samskaras? In other words, how to respond when you see aggression against someone. Do you intervene or keep quiet and do our own work?
Well, if it is within your power, then accordingly you have to react. That is your dharma. But then there are things that we cannot really react against, things beyond our sphere. There are certain things that within our power, within our obligation, our responsibility to react. Then we have to react. Then reaction becomes reacting against that adharma becomes also dharma. But if it is something beyond our sphere, beyond our scope, then there's no point of worrying about it. So I think we'll conclude now.
One last question, Maharaj. Yeah. We're almost done. Mr. Kapadia, do you want to ask your question or you want me to repeat? Go ahead and ask your question.
Where's Sunil Kapadia? Oh.
Yeah, Ramesh ji.
Oh, Ramesh is there. Okay.
Please ask you have to unmute. Let me unmute you.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Maharaj, the question is that if somebody is practicing karma yoga,
Yeah.
with all the good intentions and everything,
Yeah.
are there any practical measures that the person can tell that when the person is sidetracked or influenced by negative samskaras and the person doesn't even know that it is affecting the karma yoga practice? Are there any practical way of saying something?
Yeah. As I mentioned, if a person derives this inner feeling of contentment by doing that, then that's a proof that he's doing Swadharma. And so every spiritual seeker will develop a kind of inner mechanism that will guide him in his life. If by doing your duty you derive more and more of a feeling of contentment, what you call chitta prasada, you feel a kind of inner tranquility and peace. That itself is the proof that you're practicing karma yoga. If it creates friction, self-doubt and self-contradiction and also conflict within, then that's also the proof that there is something wrong about it. But generally, those who do their work with the full dedication to their ideal, they need not feel any self-doubt. They need not worry about it. In fact, that is the message that Lord Krishna is trying to drive home to Arjuna's mind. He says, Samsiyatma vinashyati. So, self-doubt to some extent is good. Creative doubtfulness is often helpful, but we should not doubt at every step, at every stage in our evolution. So once we decide what I'm doing, going for good of the world, then you need no doubt. Secondly, a person who is practicing Swadharma cannot consciously do any harm to anybody. That is an important point to remember. A person who is practicing Swadharma, what he does can create unhappiness to certain people. That's because those people will not understand him. That problem is there. See, Krishna also created a lot of enemies and they were not happy with him. It is not Krishna's fault. And Krishna tells Arjuna, you need not worry about what others think about you. You go ahead with steadfastness. So like that, when we do our work with total sincerity and dedication, then there is no need to stop at every stage and analyze, am I following the right track or not. No need. Our total dedication to God itself will take care of minor mistakes that could be there, but we need not worry about it.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
That's it, Maharaj. That was the
So,
last question.
thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So we will have the session continuing tomorrow at 10:30 morning. Okay.